a real privilege to have you with us, with your work for women's equality and women's rights, for a two-state solution, for Jewish-Arab collaboration, and being a Meretz MK. Your values so overlap with ours, and it's a really special to have you as our guest for Masorti Judaism's Havdalah at Home. I wanted to begin with this terrible war going on around us. President Zelensky received a standing ovation in the British Parliament yesterday. What do people in Israel feel about a Jewish president showing such courage?
Yes, I think that the vast majority of Israelis feel like every human being in the free world feels in the past 2 weeks, horror and amazement, maybe I should say, from the sudden war that can all of a sudden begin in the center of Europe, in the place where so many Jewish people and Jewish families and Jewish communities have such harsh and terrifying memories, both personal and collective, from history. And the notion that something like that can start just like that, one day you are sitting and having dinner at home with your family, and the next day you're sleeping in the metro and escaping to the borders. This is unthinkable, and Israelis follow very closely, like everyone else. After what is going on, that Israel sent representatives to the all 4 or 5 cross borders from the different countries to help Israelis and Jewish people escape.
What's the attitude to refugees in Israel? Because Israel Aid is there, as you say, and many Jewish organizations are trying to help. There are really millions of people trying to cross the borders. What's the attitude to that in Israel towards refugees?
Right. So you probably know that the Israeli government is diverse politically, and yesterday, the Minister of Interior, Ayelet Shaked, announced that Israel will accept only, maybe I should say, another 2,500 refugees that are not Jewish. That Jewish people or people who have Jewish roots are entitled to make aliyah according to Chok HaShvut, the law of return. But we feel that the more liberal center-left side of the government and of Israelis, we feel that Israel can definitely do more and accept more and just open its gates like many countries, like Britain, like the US. Of course,
I wish Britain here too. We're struggling to persuade our government to be as open as Germany and other countries in Central Europe are. So that's
yes, but still, Britain is more open than Israel. I believe Britain committed to 200,000, which is the equivalent of 20,000 in Israel, if you compare the population, yes. And we are 10th as much. So we still have where to grow. We should mention that. Israel does expect, maybe people are talking about estimates of 100,000 olim chadashim that will come from Ukraine and from Russia as some kind of refugees or just escaping the new reality in Europe. So this is another effort that Israel will face. But of course, we feel that Israel as a developed, free, democratic country can definitely do more to participate in the global effort regarding the refugees.
I really appreciate your views and your values and your approach. Democratic, free and open. You're a Meretz MK in a very, very varied Knesset. There's Yamina there's the United Arab List. What's it like being, you fight for religious pluralism? How is that working and going? And that must be tough for you some of the time.
It is, but as you mentioned, as a Meretz member, we are used to being I don't want to say a minority, because I think that our views regarding state and religion and Jewish pluralism are widely supported in the Israeli population, but we are used to being a minority maybe in the political sphere in the government because of the ultra-Orthodox parties, because of the new kind of alliance between ultra-Orthodox and Zionist Orthodox that is formed in the last years. And of course, the new government and the ultra-Orthodox parties are not part of it, but we do have Yamina, and that is, because this is a very narrow majority government, every party and every vote counts and can practically veto some of the decisions. So we are, and of course the coalition agreements we committed to a consensus on state and religion, so it makes us harder for us. Having said that, as a Meretz member, I'm used to being always optimist about the chances of achieving successes along the way, even in things that seem lost in the beginning. Take, for example, the issue of public transportation on Shabbat, which we are fighting for 30 years, that I think Israel is the only, not just democracy, the only country in the world where the public transportation is shut on the weekends and on the holidays, and when people, some of them, those who drive on Shabbat are not able to do so unless they have a private car, which is, by the way, environmental. From the environmental angle, is very. This is not the direction we should encourage. But now, in the last 2 or 3 years, there is amazing local initiatives by municipalities in the Tel Aviv area and the Tel Aviv metropolitan that the mayors and municipal authorities took upon themselves to subsidize and to operate public transportation on Shabbat, and it rides. And my 16-year-old can go and visit friends and go to the beach on Shabbat.
Of course, as a rabbi, I want people to choose not to use it, not to use it. But what about the hot spot, which is talked about all the time? What about the kotel and access and equal access to the kotel? Because that's the focus for so many people.
Yes, so this is another issue where, when I was elected to the Knesset in 2013, I joined the Women of the Wall in their prayers when they started to be arrested by the police. And unfortunately, you've been following very closely the proposed new program for the Kotel that was already a compromise, by the way, from the Jewish both Masorti and Reform streams, but even that was not able to move forward. We feel that we can move forward through a dialogue with everybody and make the conversation a very wide one. I know this is how the previous program was designed. It was stopped in the last minute by the extremists and the people who are not part of the conversation. And we feel that this is an issue where a wide conversation is needed and also possible. I know that Prime Minister Bennett met with the leaders of both the conservative and the reform movement about a week or two here in Israel. And we feel that, we also have a reform Knesset member and some Knesset members that are define themselves part of the conservative movement. For us, for Meretz, Jewish pluralism and support for the Jewish different streams was always on our agenda, and we were actually the leaders of that for so many years. And I hope that in the current political atmosphere, this is something that we can move forward, even though it's not very easy and it will be slow. But this is something that we feel that we should open the conversation about and
well, all
make
strength
progress.
to your elbow. It's just the courage and the determination they really come across. You mentioned women at the wall, and although I haven't, in the questions I didn't put this before, you served on the Knesset Committee for Gender Equality. You work for women's rights. You've worked in protecting the victims of domestic violence. Yesterday was International Women's Day. Perhaps just a word about your work in that area before we come then to the environment.
Yes, so, every March 8th, I say to all the women around me, and I'm very happy to say that there are many now, that this is a day when we celebrate the achievements that are wide and huge, but we also commemorate and we also remember the struggles and the fights that we still have to, and the path that we still have to go until we win. And, I have two daughters, one is 16 and one is 2 years old. And I think that when I look on their future, they will enjoy all the wins that we already accomplished, of course, the right to vote and going to work, and women live as free human beings, which is something that we could not imagine as humanity 100 years ago. But I hope that they will also enjoy equal pay and be free from sexual harassment. And when they will look in the media, they will see themselves as models to look up to, rather than, just objects to sell something. And I think this goes across the board in everything. I'm proud to be a part of the government that has the record number of women. 9 women serving as ministers and 10 serve as director generals of the ministries. But this is still, I think, less than a third. So we still have where to go in that prospect.
There's a road to travel.
Right.
You yourself will be a role model for your daughters and for all of us. Thank you. Coming, your Minister for the Protection of the Environment, coming to that area, I have several questions I want to ask, but the first is the general question. You're trying to push through a comprehensive act to protect the environment in Israel and to work towards net zero. How is the progress towards net zero going in the country? What do you see as the biggest challenges ahead?
Yes, so we actually committed to the net zero just recently, right before the Glasgow conference. So that was a huge achievement that our Prime Minister declared it. And we are working very hard coming to Sharm next week and next year, in the end of this year. And this is another achievement of Glasgow, that instead of waiting instead of waiting another 5 years, we only have to wait another year, and it's going to be in our region in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So this is, for us, this is an opportunity to put the commitment to net zero and the declaration into action plans, and also to do it in the same time when looking at regional cooperation and our cooperation with Egypt, with Jordan, with the Palestinians, with the Emirates, and really use the Abraham Accord and our vision to the Middle East, and integrated into the fight for both adaptation but also mitigating climate change. My ministry is working very, very hard to present both a new a climate law that will commit legally to the net zero declaration, and also put on the table an adaptation plan in which we can share the knowledge and the science with our neighboring countries in the region and promote good neighbor together with fighting climate change.
Yeah, I've read from EcoPeace, the Arava Institute, that really borders do not make sense when thinking with a regional and a global issue. Israel has much to offer in terms of ecotech, in terms of high tech, and I'm aware that Israel's been working with countries, particularly in the African continent. How do you see that developing as in Israel having a leading role there?
Yes, that is definitely something that Israel is a world leader in. There are fields in ecotech that Israel is already a world leader in terms of water usage, for example, but also in alternative protein, for example. I think we should take a leadership also in terms of renewable energies, of storage, And this is actually the hot areas in the world right now. And we invest in that, in mutual funds and research with the US, with some countries in Europe, with our region. And this is something that I think Israel can be, Or LaGoyim, and not just in our domestic influence, which is very important, of course, in our region, and not only in adapting to the climate, to the changing climate, because this is something that we'll need to do if we want to save our lives, but also in our contribution to the global effort to reduce emissions.
It'll be a new phrase, low energy or LaGoyim.
Right.
just a couple more questions before I realize you've got many duties and we'll have to finish. There's a question about oil, gas, and oligarchs and sanctions to Russia. Britain and America have just announced that they will not take Russian oil, Britain gas as well. You opposed the Red Med pipeline, which would have linked Israel and the area also to European kind of extractions. Where is Israel on this move towards clean and green energy?
Yeah, so I think the lesson that the whole world is learning right now, in these very days, is that dependence on fossil fuels can be very, very very unstable. In the 2 years of the COVID, we have seen very huge moves in the prices of oil and gas, and now the war in Ukraine and the need to boycott or sanction Russia. So we see countries, and actually the European Union only yesterday declared its plan to reduce their exposure to the Russian oil, and it is directed to developing renewable energies more quickly than before, and this will answer both questions: the climate crisis and also the political need in Europe right now. Israel has its own natural gas resources in prices that are relatively stable. So we are kind of a little bit not protected, but our exposure to the global change is minimized.
There's still the need for, in terms of reaching net zero, presumably, to move.
Exactly. So when the people are talking about the prices of oil for cars, which is, my suggestion even today, and I'm going to publish it today, is to accelerate our move to electric transportation rather than keep subsidizing the prices of oil that we don't know where they're going to get in terms of what is going on right now. So I say to everybody, the sun is free and it will always shine. So at least here in the Middle East. So as much as we can develop and accelerate our effort, we will be more protected vis-a-vis our net zero commitments, but also more protected in terms of national, energetic security, like we say.
Really important. I've long been an electric car. I thought if the rabbi drives an electric car, perhaps that'll set an example. A last question. Israel has immense biodiversity. I've been in the Chula and seen the birds there, and in the Negev, and the work also of Chaibar and the Israel Society for Protection of Nature to reintroduce species. But Israel is also a very small country with a very large population per square kilometer. How can the country protect its amazing natural and diverse riches?
Yes, I think this is actually the biggest challenge, because even if Israel will mitigate and will reach the net zero, we will suffer really literally from the climate change because of our dry and hot area. And so we are in a very vulnerable position on the globe. And you are definitely right that we have a huge challenge, because the open spaces are very, very narrow, and the pressure for development is huge, because we are a growing population, a small country, 60% of it is dry, and we need I always say, you know, there is an expression in Hebrew, sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. It means you have to think and plan, and then you have to operate. And I think when looking at the open spaces and the biodiversity, this is 10 times as much true, because land that you built on will not come back, but it will destroy the birds and the bees and the insects that are and the streams and the water and the land that is so important for the human survival in the next years and decades and even centuries. So we have to think and plan very, very closely. And the IPCC report just from last week stressed that even more than we knew before. And this is one of the focus issues in my term in the Ministry of Environmental Protection. We are working every day, and some of our plans looking at Sharem will touch on biodiversity and adaptation and the connection between them. If it goes with the river recovery, for example, we are looking at the Jordan River as a very rich ecosystem that was abandoned and is very polluted right now, and recovering it can serve both, even 3 goals of fighting climate change via nature-based solutions, saving biodiversity, and also regional cooperation and maybe promoting the peace. So, you know, we are at the center of everything is going on here. So we would love your support and help in that.
We'll have it in any way that you direct us to give it. Thank you so much, Minister Tamar Zandberg, for your time, and all strength to you in all the work that you do. Yasher kochech, and thank you so much for joining us. So
and you too. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you so much for your support and for everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.